Martin William Barr was an American psychiatrist. There are virtually no details relating to his personal life publicly available beyond the dates of his birth and death, 1860 and 1938 respectively. However, Barr is chiefly known today for his position as chief physician in the Pennsylvania Training School for Feeble-Minded Children, which he held from 1893 to 1930. In this capacity, he extensively campaigned for the sterilization of the, quote, feeble-minded. He argued that we must accept the fact that the very lifeblood of the nation is being poisoned by the rapid production of mental and moral defectives. He led the lobby to try and pass the 1901 Bill for the Prevention of Idiocy as law in Philadelphia, chiefly to give legal backing to sterilizations he was already performing without legal basis. The law passed in both houses but was returned by the governor on a technicality and never taken up again. In his role as chief physician at the Pennsylvania Training School, he, quote, emphasized manual training for students and introduced classes in printing, weaving, and basketry. His chief literary output seems to have been professional treatises on the subject of mental disability, such as Mental Defectives, Their History, Treatment, and Training, or Protecting the Mental Health of the Growing Child. Barr's 1907 The King of Thomond, A Story of Yesterday, is definitely unusual for his output to say the least, as it appears to be his only work of fiction. In the fictional introduction to the story, we find the narrator, ostensibly the author himself, coming into the possession of the story upon his appointment as assistant physician at the insane hospital at Harrisonville. There he came in contact with a catalogue of benevolently insane people, such as Mr. Chase, who is haunted by pain in his imaginary teeth 30 years after they were all removed, Mrs. Steele, who has to brush cats out of her eyes, or Mr. Harvey, who likes to paint bright watercolours of hell. One of these patients is the elderly Mrs. Una O'Brien. Torn between lucid intervals and spending days screaming and crying, Dr. Barr comes to know her more extensively and begins to study her case. She had been a teacher who taught at Harrisonville, but failed in this capacity due to certain, quote, eccentricities. She then lived in an almshouse for some months prior to her being committed after she exhibited signs of maniacal behaviour. As she lays dying, she asks the doctor to bring her a packet hidden away in her drawer. It contains an account of her life she had written for Dr. Barr's benefit, which the doctor reads upon her death. Una Constance Maybe O'Brien was descended from a Dutch family that was among the first settlers of New Amsterdam. Her own father had become an actor and married an actress of British descent who did not survive childbirth for long. At the same time, her father had already tired of Una's mother long before, preferring to spend his time with a woman of ill repute. Consequently, he doesn't want to raise her at all and pawns her off on his own landlady. Later on in life, following the conclusion of her studies, her uncle responds in her name to an advertisement seeking a private tutor/governess in Maryland. Arriving on the island of Thomond on the Chesapeake, she is introduced to Dr. O'Brien. The doctor, who charms Una with his good looks and polite behaviour, wants a tutor for his daughter Geraldine. He introduces both his wife and daughter to Una, but the pair seem strangely quiet while the doctor plays a piece on the piano. But once Una stumbles against Mrs. O'Brien and the latter falls over, Una finds out that both Dr. O'Brien's wife and daughter are only wax figures. It appears the doctor is insane and believes they are real people, even when he has to use his skills as a ventriloquist to enable them to talk. Hence his advertisement in the paper. Una has no real home, no money, and no friends, so she is forced to stay and quote-unquote teach the wax doll of O'Brien's daughter, seeing no possible method of escape. But at the same time, she finds herself growing closer to the doctor. Despite his insanity, and a full-on romance develops between the two. A short romance ending in grief and tragedy. A very interesting idea for a novel, though the insanity aspect isn't focused on for that long before the novel becomes more of a romance per se. Bizarrely, Barr seems to have used a portrait of his grandmother, Jane Addams Barr, for the portrait of Una given at the beginning of the book.